And they also, of course, had to get people to accept these so-called assets and pay money for them, even though they were highly vulnerable. Or take a farmer today. I take the farm manager of today is very different from the farmer of 1900. So it hasn't just been the spread of cognitively demanding professions, it's also been the upgrading of tasks like lawyer and doctor and what have you that have made demands on our cognitive faculties. But I've talked about education and employment. Some of the habits of mind that we have developed over the 20th century have paid off in unexpected areas. I'm primarily a moral philosopher. I merely have a holiday in psychology, and what interests me in general is moral debate. Now, over the last century, in developed nations like America, moral debate has escalated because we take the hypothetical seriously. And we also take universals seriously and look for logical connections. When I came home in 1955 from university at the time of Martin Luther King, a lot of people came home at that time and started having arguments with their parents and grandparents. My father was born in 1885, and he was mildly racially biased. As an Irishman, he hated the English so much he didn't have much emotion for anyone else. But
that sounds about right.
He did have a sense that black people were inferior. And when we said to our parents and grandparents, how would you feel if tomorrow morning you woke up black? They said, that is the dumbest thing you've ever said. Who have you ever known who woke up in the morning that turned black? In other words, they were fixed in the concrete mores and attitudes they had inherited. They would not take the hypothetical seriously. And without the hypothetical, it's very difficult to get moral argument off the ground. You have to say, you know, imagine you were in Iran, and imagine that your relatives all suffered from collateral damage, even though they had done no wrong. How would you feel about that? And if someone of the older generation says, well, our government takes care of us, and it's up to their government to take care of them, they're just not willing to take the hypothetical seriously. Or take an Islamic father whose daughter has been raped and he feels he's honor bound to kill her. Well, he's treating his mores as if they were sticks and stones and rocks that he had inherited, and they're unmovable in any way by logic. They're just inherited mores. Today we would say something like, well, imagine you were knocked unconscious and sodomized. Would you deserve to be killed? And he would say, well, that's not in the Quran. You know, that's not one of the principles I've got. Well, you today universalize your principles. You state them as abstractions and you use logic on them. If you have a principle such as people shouldn't suffer unless they're guilty of something, then to exclude black people, you've got to make exceptions, don't you? You have to say, well, blackness of skin, you couldn't suffer just for that. It must be that blacks are somehow tainted. And then we can bring empirical evidence to bear, can't we? And say, well, how can you consider all blacks tainted when St. Augustine was black and Thomas Sowell was black? You can get moral argument off the ground then, because you're not treating moral principles as concrete entities. You're treating them as universals to be rendered consistent by logic. Now, how did all of this arise out of IQ tests? That's what initially got me going on cognitive history. If you look at the IQ test, you find the gains have been greatest in certain areas. The similarity subtest of the Wechsler is about classification, and we have made enormous gains on that classification subtest. There are other parts of the IQ test battery that are about using logic on abstractions. Some of you may have taken Raven's progressive matrices, and it's all about analogies. And in 1900, people could do simple analogies. That is, if you said to them, cats are like wild cats, what are dogs like? They would say wolves. But by 1960, people could attack ravens on a much more sophisticated level. If you said, we've got two squares followed by a triangle, what follows two circles? They could say a semicircle. just as a triangle is half of a square and a semicircle is half of a circle. By 2010, college graduates, if you said 2 circles followed by a semicircle, 2 16s followed by what? They would say 8, because 8 is half of 16. That is, they had moved so far from the concrete world that they could even ignore the appearance of the symbols that were involved in the question. Now, I should say one thing that's very disheartening. We haven't made progress on all fronts. One of the ways in which we would like to deal with the sophistication of the modern world is through politics. And sadly, you can have humane moral principles, you can classify, you can use logic on abstractions. And if you're ignorant of history and of other countries, you can't do politics. We've noticed a trend among young Americans that they read less history and less literature and less material about foreign lands. And they're essentially ahistorical. They live in the bubble of the present. They don't know the Korean War from the war in Vietnam. They don't know who was an ally of America in World War II. Think how different America would be if every American knew that this is the 5th time Western armies have gone to Afghanistan to put its house in order. And if they had some idea of exactly what had happened on those 4 previous occasions. And that is, they had barely left and there wasn't a trace in the sand. Or imagine how different things would be if most Americans knew that we had been lied into 4 of our last 6 wars. You know, the Spanish didn't sink the battleship Maine. The Lusitania was not an innocent vessel but was loaded with munitions. The North Vietnamese did not attack the 7th Fleet. And of course, Saddam Hussein hated Al-Qaeda and yet had nothing to do with it. And yet the administration convinced 45% of the people that they were brothers in arms when he would hang one from the nearest lamppost. But I don't want to end on a pessimistic note. The 20th century has shown enormous cognitive reserves in ordinary people that we have now realized. And the aristocracy was convinced that the average person couldn't make it, that they could never share their mindset or their cognitive abilities. Lord Curzon once said he saw people bathing in the North Sea, and he said, "Why did no one tell me what white bodies the lower orders have?" As if they were a reptile. Well, Dickens was right and he was wrong. Dickens said, "The Colonel's Lady and Judy O'Grady are sisters underneath the skin."
So that's James Flynn, and we call it the Flynn effect. It was a measurable increase in IQ by cohort. I wouldn't call it generation, but by cohort. Now, some of the things he said, I think excellent, but I also would like to add that one of the things I obviously see is that young people, especially, actually, really a lot of us, are constantly connected to abstractions, to the internet. If you think of it, we're constantly in intense visual communications, movies, TV. When you go back to the farmers, they had no contact with other people except maybe Sundays, right? But today you're in constant contact, 24/7, depending on what you're doing and so on. So you're constantly receiving neurological stimulation, and that's like exercising. So if you think of it, it's changing the muscle of our brain by just incredible amounts of exercise. So that increases the speed, the IQ of our thinking. But on the other hand, as he just briefly touched on, with the idea that contemporary students are ahistorical, they're not reading, the competition with the media makes it very difficult for you to sit for hours at a time, as in my little demonstration video, sitting there reading. And as far as we understand it, the only way for you to get lots of linear-like information into your brain is by reading a book. We're not getting it by, say, watching movies and so on. There's only one basic plot, or two basic plots in movies. So how many of you saw the new Star Wars movie. How many of you think it's exactly the same movie?
That's why it's sold.
It's the same movie as
It's
number
New
4,
Hope. It's
right?
just-
You know,
yeah.
it's the monomyth again. You know, except we just changed the characters around and so on. And I don't want to say what happened to Han Solo, right? Because some of you might not have seen. So you know, how much do you learn from it? Lots of stimulation. You know, same thing with computer games. You ever watched people playing computer games? Some of you probably play computer games.
Yeah.
Sorry, was that?
I was wondering why you were pointed, looking at me.
I'm just
This kid.
guessing, actually, you know. But, you know, those games are intense. The music tells you you're saving the world. You really are. You know, you're killing all these evil creatures, you know, and you kill enough of them, you get enough points that you get elevated, that you kill even more, that you get and the dragon, and you get
Depends on what game you're playing.
all the stuff, right? You know, no wonder by the time you finish the game, you don't finish it never ends.
You just go on to the next one.
You know, Final Fantasy 15, you know, comes out.
Bad example.
Sorry about that. But you know, how much are you actually learning from the game? You know, you're getting lots of mental stimulation and you're doing lots of stuff. But you know, and plus, oh my goodness, to sit down. I had one student who watched a presentation I showed of Jared Diamond, who wrote a Guns, Germs, and Steel, yes, but Collapse. When Collapse came out, he actually was here. We had him, so on. And this lecture was virtually identical to the YouTube version of it, which is there. But I played that for a class. The idea of encouraging people to listen to 45 minutes of lengthy, steady debate or argument, scientific argument, right? Which is a skill that not everybody has when you're in a constant, everything's going on, you know, you're just constantly reacting to things, but taking the time to sit and listen to someone highlight a particular argument, basically suggesting you read the book, right? Well, one student said, oh, I'm going to read that book. And he did. He went out and he got the book, brought it, and started reading it, and he got up to page 3. And he said, and he looked at me in class and he said, how do you read a book? So he got up to page 3, and it was like, he was woofed. No more energy to keep, he was exhausted. Hit page 3, and that's it. That's the further, and that's 800 pages.
That's not even that long.
How do you read a book? Well, you can't just start with Jared Diamond when you're in college. You have to start off when you're a kid, you know, with mom, you know, sitting there going, Big B, Big Brown Bear, Big Brown Bear, Blue Bull, Big Brown Bear, Blue Bull, beautiful baboon, Big Brown Bear, Blue Bull, beautiful baboon, blowing bubbles, Big Brown Bear, Blue Bull, beautiful baboon, blowing bubbles, biking backwards. Big Brown Bear, Blue Bull, beautiful baboon, blowing bubbles, biking backwards, it's the bee book, right? You've done this, right? You read until your tongue is numb, you know, Dr. Seuss, etc., right? Your kids grow up and they don't want to walk next to you in the mall because you're still talking in rhyme all the time, you know, which is oh, you know, well, now they're mature. You know, they don't want to be anywhere near those kind of people. You know, that's how that works. So the issue is intelligence is absolutely great. The IQ is higher. That's great. You know, younger people are working with quad Pentiums, and I've still got a 286 SX. You know, so I'm 64K RAM. That's enough for me. You guys have, you know, gigabytes of RAM. You know,
Microsoft Word, that's all that matters.
But I've been reading since I was 3 months old. Probably even younger, actually. I don't know if my mom read to me while I was still in the womb with a view. Right? But you can actually read to your children while they're just, you're earbuds beginning, and so play music for them. But obviously this, because once the earbuds are there, the neurons are growing, you can actually construct a neural network in the child. Please don't play heavy metal. Also avoid pollutants, right? No alcohol. Please, no alcohol. I mean, fetal alcohol. I raised one of those. I discovered it's a terminal illness starting from infancy, basically. Of course, we're all terminally ill. We're mortal, right? But we actually could not I know, Roman Catholics, we should have had, hundreds of children. Every sperm is sacred. But no, we could not figure out how to make them ourselves, so we had to buy our children. I mean, adopt them. Right? So we have 4, and the good news is 3 of them are people. The 4th one, however, has fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, been tested. It's never going to be a full-fledged person. He's just not really capable of it. You could talk to him, he seems likable and so on, but he's a chameleon. Behaves the way the people around him behave and expect him to behave. So alcoholic, he's been in jail, Lord help us, right? And we can't fix it because it's a hardware issue, right? So pollutants, avoid pollutants. Right? Drugs. I'm on caffeine. Obviously, I'm on something tonight, right? But caffeine is like, we think it's okay. Red wine. My group, we kind of all agreed that brandy or scotch might even be better than wines. But the restaurant we go to on Wednesday nights drinks wine, so that's what we do. So how do we get young people to read? Because that's where they lose that historicity that he was talking about there. So I recommend at least 2 hours a day, just sitting reading a book. I'm at the point, of course, I've been reading all my life, and I could read a book in a day, depending on the book. That's possibly because a lot of them are really awful. I've seen this before. This is all repete la phrase,
It's surgeon's law. 90% of everything's crap, but the other 10%, it's pretty good.
That's your juicy fruit that flew down into the cavity. That's Kramer. The other thing about this too is the more visual stimuli you've had in your memory, squirrel, right? I have ADD squared, so it's very hard to stay on that linear track because I'm now used to clicking on the link to find out where this is going, right? So I don't just go linearly down the argument, I go horizontal to see where he's pulling this information from as we're going. And sometimes you end up learning about the mating behavior of rabbits before you get back. Okay?
It's a YouTube loop. It's called YouTube.
And you can see I'm infected with YouTube, etc.
Start off looking at one thing.
But we have to read. We also have to take time to read. And that's really essential when you're just doing so many things. How do you do it? How do you take time to do it? I had my daughter once, I'm sitting there at the table reading for hours. She comes by, how do you do that? It's not that hard. Well, I've practiced this. And I learned my Russian vocabulary, walking around, remember, right? I had to remember this. Deutschland, 3 years in Berlin, picked up the German language. I had one course in college and realized it's English. You just have to remember to put the verb at the end. Okay, so hold it when you get done. When you're done.
Father.
Of course, my spelling is totally screwed up. But actually, Russian did that.
With their.
Where is, here it is. It's up in the shade here. Okay. So, how do we get an A? In a legitimate way, right? Because everybody can get an A, but I actually have to really teach you the material. And you have to actually show me that you get it. That's how we do it, right? So there will be 4 tests in the class. 2 of them, as I'll show you, are actually already posted. These practice test things along the way here are just things that are on the web. I'm not actually going to use any of these for anything. They're there for you to have fun with, right? Notice that the book itself has a website, although this is the earlier edition, so I'm not sure if they've updated this website to the 3rd edition or not. But if you discover it, let me know. Give me the link. But so you have student resources here. So chapter 1, I could get the chapter summary if you're looking for it. But by the way, I've scanned through the book at least, and it's very few changes at all. Chapter guide, flashcards, if you want that. Also video tutorials, self-quizzes, right? So all these are available for free on the web. You don't need any kind of special card or anything. They're just there so they can help you with the book
This
as
is a
you're...
video tutorial for chapter 1, problem set 1F, exercise 5.
Cool.
In this exercise, we're
Sounds
going
like
to
fun.
construct a count, for example, to show.
That's the same
deductive
woman that's in my
arithmetic
car that
how
tells me where to go.
They all sound the same.
She's all over the place.
Identify the form or
I
structure.
think she's
of
an
our
Ex Machina.
You pick.
I haven't seen that movie.
You haven't seen that?
Is that any good? Because I've heard
I
good things
loved it.
about
I
it.
thought it was really interesting.
Yeah.
You've done that?
It was supposed to be about the development of AI, right?
Well, this is a serious contemporary issue because some people think that computers are getting so powerful so fast, they're already. I got emailed from an appliance the other day. My scale, my bathroom scale, emailed me and says I need new batteries.
That'd be terrifying. You're
I
like,
have never gotten an email from one of my own appliances. Like, it's a person.
keep me alive.
Now when I see the scale sitting there, I'm like,
It
what
knows.
is it thinking? You know?
It's slowly judging you.
So it's like,
It's like,
really,
oh look,
you
you
know.
gained a few pounds.
Oh, I mean, I'm connected to my scale, and it knows where I am. The FBI can figure out exactly where
Through your scale. Find a scale.
But they know when I'm being dumb. You started your run, and then you didn't finish it. You got in your car, and now you're driving. You know, like, hey, the run is over. You can't be running that fast. You know. President Obama has one of these. However, so we have to have tests. These are just for fun. The website is also, I'm not going to use it myself, but it's there for you if you're into that sort of thing. But here is my first test that is due. I'll go back a second here. So this is due on February 11th, right? Sometime on or around there. If you email me and say, is it due at 11:59? That's okay. I'll be fine. But notice that it is essays. I give you 6 questions. You pick 3. These are for you yourself to write your own thoughts. Try to make at least 300 words, please, for each one. I use the language learning model. The whole point of how we learn is through reading, speaking, writing, listening, and so on. So fluency comes with more volume of use. Right? That's. You had a question?
Oh, I was just wondering for the number 3, analyze a couple of jokes and compare them to logical fallacies. Do you think the various types of fallacies are again different styles of jokes? What do you mean by fallacies?
Well, we'll cover them.
Okay.
So this isn't a test for you to take yet. This is what
Future.
we'll be looking at covering essentially.
Do you have a verbal format?
No,
Okay.
email, but
For essay.
yeah, I don't use MLA,
Good.
any mean, you're welcome, you're welcome if you're really addicted to one of those, feel free. But usually I'll reformat it to save it myself anyway. I save everything as HTML or HTML. Because that way Microsoft can't cheat me out of my own history of documents, because they've changed the format and I can't retrieve them anymore. That's
But you prefer punctuation
punctuation is good. Punctuation is good. Correct spelling, I think, is kind of significant. And please don't plagiarize. I think this is more important in a bigger, like a term paper or something. But what is plagiarism? No, I stole this from Wikipedia.
That's horrible.
But I did give you the link. That's
Well, technically stealing if
that's-
it's free.
I'm referring to actually the link no longer works. It used to be that they said trying to pass someone else's work off as your own. Okay, that's pretty easy,
Yeah.
right? But I like to make things complex, because I'm a philosophy major. Right? Let's see how far we can dig this hole to find the bottom. That's the way to make things more complex, right? Let's dig up more. Find out, can you become president if you were born in Canada? Well,
No.
if, the argument was you couldn't become president if you were born in Kenya. Well, what's the difference between Kenya and Canada? Your mother was an American citizen. No, what? That's sorry. That was Anne, right? Argued that the other day. I don't know if you're okay. So we have some conventions that we use that get us out of this problem of saying we're plagiarizing, right? Because we are plagiarizing. All of our ideas come from somewhere else, right? And, so should I actually always remember to make sure that everybody gets credit for all the ideas I had? I mean, all these ideas that they're not my own, right? So we get these conventions. So you can quote, so notice, quotations, right? And here's the link, so the thing that hath been, it is that which shall be, and that which is done is that which shall be. There's no new thing under the sun. You've all heard that, right?
Yeah.
So that's from Ecclesiastes. We can even quote at length. So here's a whole foot-long quote, right, from England's Dreaming, which that link might not even be good anymore. But notice it's interesting that he says there's nothing new under the sun, and he's not footnoting that. So how does he get away with that? Well, it's because there's certain things that we begin considering to be common knowledge, and if you use them, then you don't have to give me the footnote. That's not considered plagiarism, because everybody says that.
It's always under the sun.
You could also rephrase things in your own words, right? So you read something, you rephrase it, and submit it as your own work. Well, but you still actually are obligated to refer or cite your source. You still should footnote that, even though you use. I feel like sometimes Americans are just so proud of our own accomplishments that it's almost psychologically difficult, painful for us to say where we got all of these resources from.
Everyone
But the
else.
thing is, if you think of research as, I'm proud that I've done all this research and I want to show you, I want to floor you with all the citations. That is a much more positive way of looking at it. Then you're worried, well, am I going to be floored by all these names? Deliver us from the sea of names. Plus, then you get into this puzzle. If all my ideas come from someone else, and I'm just mixing them up, when can I ever write without trying to pin the blame on them for somebody else? Right? It gets even worse because of our technology, right? So, for example, you could go to Ringworks. Have you ever been there? This is a fun site because on Ringworks, what you could do is take something from the internet, or even that you write. You could either plug it into the dialectized box, or you could just put the link here. And what will happen then is you select which dialect you want it to be in, You could
Jive.
pick redneck.
Speaking of jive.
Jive, Cockney, Elmer Fudd, Swedish Chef.
Hacker.
So you could take something and run it through there. So the paragraph I wrote up here, I ran through redneck, and notice how it changed. But you know, my F and all my ideas come from someone else, and I was just mixing them up into my ideas. And this one, I love this stuff.
I'm glad you showed me this.
So now the issue with this is, you know, if I had taken somebody's paragraph, ran it through redneck, and then tried to take credit for it, is that plagiarism? What's your gut feeling? Is it my own work, or is it plagiarism?
Well, you're giving that work to a third-party source which is doing it for you, so you're plagiarizing them then.
I'm actually plagiarizing both. It gets even worse. If you go to this website, okay. So here, this is referred to as the postmodern generator. We don't live in the modern times anymore. This is the postmodern, right? You've heard that probably, right? 1864, I think, was the beginning of the postmodern period for the French historians, and the Civil War.
That was also under the government.
So here we have a term paper in postmodernese, but it's a good paper, Cultural Nationalism and Semioticist Narrative. Semioticist, theory of meaning, semiotics, theory of meaning. It's a real word.
Yeah, I do. I believe I just don't know what it meant.
The semiotic is
Now
the
I
theory
do.
of sign.
Yeah, I
meaning.
think I've heard it before, but yeah.
So the main theme, Eco, Umberto Eco, great author. You know, Name of the Rose. Sean Connery was in the movie. Great movie. The main theme of Latourneu's critique of semioticist narrative is not narrative per se, but post-narrative. Jeffrey could suggest that we have to choose between post-dialectic theory and Debordist situation. However, the subject is contextualized into, etc. And by the way, as you read through it, you'll see that it also has footnotes and the references, citations, etc. So it's all done for you. You could copy this and submit it to your postmodern literature teacher for your term paper, and
They'd run it through and be like, oh.
she could not demonstrate that it, should I have selected that she would be a she right away? But she could not have demonstrated that this was plagiarized by checking the net and seeing it, because this is non-repeatable. So for example, if I select refresh on this page, normally you would just get the same thing back. Oh, wait a minute, though, it's completely different. Totally different term paper.
My God.
Again? Again?
You have gifted me a very great tool, sir.
So what's going on here? Well, this is the Dada engine. Alan Sokol one energy. So Alan Sokol was absolutely convinced that postmodern journals were a bunch of bunkus, worthless crap. And so what he ended up doing was creating an algorithm, a computer algorithm, then gathering a database of postmodern information, statements, etc., and ran it through his algorithm, refined it a bit, and ended up then getting to the point where you end up with these new term papers every time you click on the link. Right?
So it's randomly selecting words and
It's
putting them together.
completely computer generated, and as you can see, very, very fast. Right? But it was just like postmodern journals would publish. So he submitted such an article to a postmodern journal, And they accepted it for publication. And at the same time that it was published in the journal, he also published an article in a science journal explaining what he had done. So they both come out together. You know, the scientific community is like, ha ha ha, you guys are just trying to pull the wool over everybody's eyes. You're not actually doing any, it's just junk.
You're just saying words.
The postmodernists were reading the journal and said, what? That's a good article.
That's what they.
So, the situation got worse because a couple of MIT graduate students took his data engine, compiled a database of science information, ran it through, printed off a term paper, submitted it to a science journal, and it was accepted.
That's a pretty good engine.
Okay, so this gets really bad, right? Because now you come to realize that what are we doing when we're learning to write? We're learning how the algorithm works, and we're doing the practice of gathering the data, reading, finding the data, and creating our writing assignment, right? Computers can do this too. You have, obviously somebody has to gather the data though and run it through the algorithm, but the more you do it, the more refined your algorithm gets, the better your skills work. Writing is one of our most important, most critical skills. A lot of the jobs you'll get coming out of college will be writing jobs, where your job will be to research something, write the article, next, and then research another one, write, research another one, write. That's your job, right? A lot of writing jobs are just like that. So do you have to remember all the things that you gathered for your term paper? No. Years later, your term papers, you won't even remember what they were. But you've learned how to use the algorithm. You've trained yourself to do that. You know how to do research, and you can do that very, very quickly. Boss gives you a job. We need someone to write a summary of this situation. What happened at the terminal when the BP leak started, and then all the inquiries about that. You go, you know how to research it, you put the thing together, whammo, and there it is. That's your job. Right? Term paper, basically. But computers can do this too. So, when do they take over? When do they start emailing us? I need new batteries. They're doing this now. So AI is scary. And that movie is actually kind of playing on a theme. We've seen this before. Mr. Spock is supposedly logical. Data in Star Trek, right? He's a computer. So they play with this a lot. The thing is, it's getting real. Computers are really learning how to take over things. And so the question is, how do we make sure that our computers are going to be nice to us when they take over the world?
When they
It's a big ethical question for sure.
And the problem is, it requires us to encode the ethics. Which means if you've ever coded computers, you know that you have to be incredibly detailed, otherwise the computer kills all of the astronauts because they were going to shut it down.
iRobot.
Well, iRobot.
HAL, right?
2009: A Space Odyssey.
HAL, which is IBM.
Yeah, it's gonna
Everybody
be.
knows it. Okay, so it's a serious issue, because as we start doing this and try to figure, okay, so how do we code the computer? Thou shalt not harm human beings. What does that mean?
The prime directive.
Yeah, but
How does it define harm?
what about the doctor that goes, take a shot, whoa, goosh, you're harming my human. No,
No.
I was taking a blood test. You have to be very, very, very specific. Otherwise, the vacuum cleaner will not be able to get that spot. Right?
Chooses not.
I mean, really, you have to be very specific with the computer, because a computer doesn't do universal analysis the way we do. We're weird that way. So we can do what Mr. Flynn was explaining, right? So what if you go to the postmodern generator and you take a page from there, as I did here? Obviously, you couldn't get caught because it's non-repeatable. So no one can go and say, aha, here's where you got it from, because it's not there, right? But, well, that's still plagiarism, right? Plus, it's really not the way I write, right?
They'll notice.
Even worse, what I did was I took that and then I ran it through the redneck dialectizer.
It's a lot of big words for that.
Good. Because notice I say, hopefully by this point, you are getting a good laugh